And for the first time in 2004, it's Martin.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. Well done for getting up this early in the morning, you crazy lot. What on earth are you doing? But I love your love of this sport. I hope I'm not just speaking to your video recorder here. There's lots of action on the grid, a lot of atmosphere, as you would expect, and anticipation. I was just, let's see if we can get hold of Rubinho. How are you doing? Good to see you. Looking good for you?
Yeah, looking good. I mean, yesterday was so close between myself and Michael. Right now, the car, I think everyone is going to find out a little bit. We've been testing in several places, but the true potential of the car is still to find out.
Are you at all concerned being on the right-hand side of the grid?
Well, I've seen the Porsche races and the other races. The second place always overtook the first one, so I'm looking forward.
Yeah, because you've had no warm-up here to clean the grid up as you would have in the good old days. But, I mean, there's a race starting here every 15 minutes, isn't there, more or less? So it's incredible. And you got a chance to beat Michael today. Can you beat him in a straight fight?
I've been better all the time, and I think I had a chance to drive this car only a little bit, but on the old one, I've been testing more and more the race pace, and we're very close. So depends pretty much a little bit of lucky here, there. I think so.
These new wide mirrors you have, which must be a bit difficult to see out of, you're not going to need them much today, are you? Because you're going to be so far in front, I think.
In some areas they are more difficult if you're going up and down, but you know they're more to the outside so you can see, but I hope I'm not using them.
Yeah, there's not going to be anybody in them. Good luck. Good to see you. I saw Valentino Rossi cruising around here somewhere. I really would like a quick word with him, but let's just go down to see if we find. He's got to be an interesting guy to talk to. JPM doesn't normally like talking, but Juan Pablo, a quick word. British TV, top man. What do you think? P3 on the grid, got a chance to stay with these Red Boys?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. In the start, for a long time I haven't been in the clean side. Now with the new start, it'll be interesting to see what everybody does. If we can make it work, we might be able to get a good jump, at least on one of the red cars, and see what happens from there. It's really a pretty interesting race. The weather doesn't really suit us that well, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, you mean you need a warmer track for the Michelins, but at least it's good for the brakes, though, yeah?
Yeah, but we didn't have any problems with the brakes, so it's a bit of a shame.
All right, well, good luck and have a good one. Let's see if we can find Rossi. Oh, he's talking down now to another TV company. So, Pasquale, can you muscle in here? Because, like, ITV is more important than all this lot. He lives in London, this man. He's sort of the Michael Schumacher of the motorcycle world. And he's absolutely a top man. Hello, Valentino, a quick word for British TV. You're living in London, I believe?
Yes, always, yes. Live in London and stay very well.
Okay, good. You're testing down here for Yamaha. How's it going?
Yes, we start to test, we follow, we need time, we need to work. Tuesday we go in Phillip Island and we hope we catch Honda.
Good luck with that. Who do you want to win this Grand Prix? Are you a Ferrari man?
Yes, I like Ferrari. I think it's between the two Ferraris or also Montoya. I hope to see a great show.
Okay, and they say that you'd be very good for Formula One. You fancy trying that? You tried rallying, you want to try single-seater?
I always like car. I start with go-kart, I make some rally race. I want to try one Formula One. I don't know if it's possible, but maybe this year is possible.
I think it's very possible. Have a Sir Sterling. Oh, he's going to talk to Valentino. I want to see Mark Webber, local hero, and see if we can get a quick word with Mark before he gets in the car. Oh, you look really stressed out, mate, and sort of worried to death. Chilled as normal. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I think we're in for a great Grand Prix. I think there's going to be a few retirements. Start will be interesting, obviously, with this new drivers got to do the work, so that'll be interesting. Hope we can get away well. But we're in for a good Grand Prix. It's a good mix up here. I think the top six could be interesting at the end.
What's actually the chances of getting away with a good start? Is it 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10, or 10 out of 10?
I'd probably say 7.
Oh, really? So you think a good number of the cars on the grid will be pretty sluggish? Well, you can't stall them anymore, can you? But you can bog them down a bit.
Yeah, I just think that there's a good start and there's an average start. They're very easy to get off the line average, but you want to get away well, that's the hard part. So I just hope there's a few boys make some mistakes here and we can have a look through.
Yeah, all right, good. What's the realistic target for you today?
Well, just strong finish, clean pit stops, no mistakes from my side. Try and get the top 6.
All right, good luck. Good to see you. I heard Bernie de Bolt is wandering around here somewhere. We're not sure where, and he's not the easiest man to see. in all of this lot. I wanted maybe to have a quick word with David Richards as well of BAR. Let's head back up here because I know we've spoken to David, and maybe we'll just try Alonso. We've been lucky with drivers today. Fernando. Fernando? No, he's going to get in the car. He's not ready to talk. He's not ready to talk to us today. I think it's a good time to go back to Jim.
Thanks very much indeed, Martin. Of course, we heard from Fernando Alonso just a couple of minutes ago anyway, didn't we? Some terrific little grid walk from Martin there. Now, Tony's quite interesting going on there down on the grid. A lot of talk that we said about the start. Who would you expect really to get away well? It used to be the Renaults, of course, didn't it? But that launch control has been taken away from them now.
Well, I would expect Juan Pablo to get away quite well. I would expect the Ferraris to get away well. Clearly, the people on the inside, on the dirty side, like Jenson Button, are going to have a little bit of a problem with traction because they weren't able to run over that period. There isn't a warm-up session in the morning. But I think everyone is going to be quite tentative, quite worried about this because, you know, it's not done for them, and it's down to the driver. Yeah. And the person who's messed them up in the past is Michael Schumacher, particularly in his championship year in Japan when he failed.
Do you feel it's all really playing into Michael Schumacher and Ferrari's hands here? Because Michelin would have hoped for it to be much hotter. It's dropped several degrees from yesterday, and the Bridgestone's working so well in these sort of conditions.
Ferrari do have a stranglehold here, and this car, although it was so conservative and everyone looked at it and said, well, it looks like all the other Ferraris, it's great underneath the skin, and I expect it to be very, very strong indeed. But at the same time, Michael Schumacher has made mistakes. Look at the things that happened last year to him, and you know, look at the big offs he had. He even had an off here in practice as well when the wind caught his car, and he went off in exactly the same place as David Coulthard did coming out of the last corner. And you know, he could still make one of those mistakes. You never know. He's got to get away as cleanly as possible.
And looking at Mark Webber there, it never ceases to amaze me how calm the fellow is. He's got the whole of the nation watching him. First Grand Prix of the season, home Grand Prix, and absolutely ice cool.
But now the difference is, once he's in that cockpit, which he is now, he says, I could be anywhere. I could be in Italy, I could be in France. He'll be focusing just on the race ahead. He'll be trying not to look at the grid girls, concentrating
you can have a glance if he wants, can't he?
Well, you know, he understands there's a huge pressure on his shoulders. Now you're looking at that weird nose, the old walrus nose there on the new Williams. And it's revolutionary car. Antonio Terzi, the aerodynamicist who came up with that. You see the difference there on the front of the Ferrari, a very traditional nose, the long nose there with the wing underneath it. It's much shorter on the Williams, and that's designed to get the airflow much cleaner through underneath the car. And of course, Ross Brawn, the technical director, overseeing operations as usual, the big general.
Absolutely. Well, your winter Formula One famine is nearly over. Michael Schumacher up the front there. But the pole sitter, I have to tell you, rarely wins here. Just 3 have come through in the last 9 years. Jenson Button, well, he has grown up since his Melbourne debut as a teenager. And I just wonder, 67 races on, if Button can get on that podium. You've got to factor in Alonso, you've got to factor in Montoya and that revolutionary Williams, plus the Australian Mark Webber in the Jaguar. Those are the fascinating ingredients for the Foster's Australian Grand Prix. You're with ITV F1 for the first race of the 2004 season. It is the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne. Ferrari have really been the qualifying masters, but now the challengers have regrouped. Let's go to the commentary box and join James Allen and Martin Brundle. Now, James, what do you make of what's going to happen at the start?
Well, I think the launch control being banned, Jim, should certainly add to the drama, and we'll find out all about that in 5 minutes' time from now. Hello, everyone, and welcome then to the start of the 2004 Formula One World Championship for the 9th year. The season kicking off in Melbourne, Australia. There it is, the wonderful skyline and the beautiful Albert Park circuit sandwiched between the city and the ocean. Well, it's always the perfect place to begin the championship trail because of the sheer enthusiasm, the organisers, and of the huge crowds we get here every year. Last year, over 400,000 people attending over the 4 days, and I'm told that the crowds are up again this year. Certainly you can see plenty of people jammed into this beautiful park around the lake in the centre there. 5 months then have elapsed since last we met at Suzuka, where we saw Michael Schumacher crowned world champion for the 6th time, and today he begins the defence of his title in pole position with teammate Rubens Barrichello alongside him. Ferrari certainly had a very strong weekend, but Williams, shake there of Ralf Schumacher and his teammate Juan Pablo Montoya, Renault and BAR are all in good shape here this weekend. Montoya bound to take the fight to Ferrari today from 3rd on the grid. And watch out also for Fernando Alonso starting 5th in the Renault. That car, Martin, has been extremely fast during the winter testing, particularly over the longer runs, and they're very pleased with the way that they preserve the tyres. And I think strategically Alonso may well be running a little bit more fuel today to try and capitalise on that in the early part of the running. Yes,
ironically, if you have a car that is good over a longer run, it's not often that good for a one lap. In other words, it doesn't work its tyres that hard, and sometimes if you want grip immediately into a single flying lap, the car wants to be working in turn 1, 2 and 3. If you've got a car that's very kind to its tyres, when you get 14 or 15 laps into a run, it's still keeping those rear tyres intact, and that's what we're expecting from the Renault team. A car that, as the Grand Prix unfolds, remains very strong. I have to say, we'll all be surprised now if the Ferrari doesn't sort of waltz off and have its own race at the front. Let's hope we're wrong about that, but it should be an almighty scrap for 3rd place. But as Ruben said, reliability comes into it. I stood talking to Ross Brawn on the grid just before I did the grid walk, and he said, I'm just trying to work out what might go wrong. Everything is going so right for Ferrari. Well, yes, but I remember last year here, they were on pole by over a second, and everyone thought, oh, here we go, 2002 all over again. But they didn't win the race here last year, and they went on to have a very, very tightly fought championship. This year, Schumacher only on pole by half a second over Juan Pablo Montoya, so it's quite a lot of difference between the 2 years. That's an important point, but also last year we had the wonderful situation of rain, didn't we, which is always throws a few double six during the Grand Prix to unsettle it. But yes, you're absolutely right. Let's wait and see how it does unfold. But certainly a Button, I think, should be in there somewhere. So should Webber, and the first 10, I reckon, should be having quite a good fight. A lot of underperformers on the grid. McLaren very, very slow. Raikkonen down in 10th, Coulthard 12th. And what's scary about that is, even if Coulthard didn't have the problem in the last lap, he still would only have been 1 place higher on the grid than he is. So they really do lack pace unless they've got a lot more fuel on board than anybody else. I think the pit stop windows are going to be somewhere between 11 and 16, depending on how they're running for this afternoon. Those that are running 2 stops may be running a short first stint anyway, so we'll wait and see. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the race strategy as the beginning of the race unfolds. 2 lights then on the board, with the grid being cleared. Jenson Button we caught a glimpse of there. He's on the left-hand side of your screens, just behind the Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello. That's 4th on the grid. Not his best ever qualifying performance. Memorably, he was 3rd at Spa back in 2000, his first season in Formula One with the Williams team. But nevertheless, a tremendous start to what he hopes will be a real breakthrough year for Jenson Button. They're the rather beautiful McLaren, but at the moment not performing. Beautiful sculpted front wing, the anteater nose. Tremendous variety this year, as you'll see in the designs. Look at the Williams there on the right with the walrus nose, the long Ferrari. A lot of variety in designs this year. Schumacher a little slow off the line there. Barrichello shoots past him. Shouldn't be too much of a problem to let Michael Schumacher back again. Looking out of the window, first race of the season. Always quite a few people get left behind.
but it looks as though the reliability has been good, and on this parade lap, they are all getting away safely.
Well, standing at the end of the pit lane and watching the practice starts, there were certainly a lot of them that didn't work. And of course, this year they've lost their launch control, as it's called, where they can just release a button and the electronics do all the work. The driver has to control the clutch action and the throttle action real time, and up until the car's doing 100 kilometers per hour, and that's an average of the 4 wheel speed. So it's not just a question of spinning the rear wheels up to 100, click 60 miles an hour. They're getting the car moving. The driver must be controlling everything, so he has to feed in the hand clutch. Now remember, you're operating a micro switch. You're not operating a hydraulic pump as you would be on your own car, road car clutch, indeed with your brakes too. So you don't really get that much of a feel coming through the steering wheel. It is quite tricky to get it right. And what they're trying to do is mimic now how the launch control used to work at its best. It's changed. When we used to manually start before, we always used to use a lot of revs for security to make sure you don't stall the engine or bog down. But if they get the revs too low, they'll be slow away.
Lovely aerial view then of this 3.3 mile, 16 corners here at the Albert Park circuit around that lake, as you can see. Cars just making their way around, warming up the tyres. Top speed here, about 185 miles an hour. They hit that just down the pit straight before they go into the brakes into turn 1. Jean Todt there, the man who has presided over the immense success of Ferrari over the last few years. And the quest really for everybody is to try and knock Ferrari and Michael Schumacher off their perch. What a prize, Martin, for these young drivers out there now, to be the first one in this century, if you like, to knock Michael Schumacher off the perch. It really, I sense they all want to beat him before he retires. It's absolute must for Raikkonen, Alonso, Montoya, Ralf Schumacher.
Yes, they feel it'll be devalued if they win the next World Championship after Michael Schumacher goes, whenever that may be, and he says it'll be some time away. We nearly saw a Renault smash into the back of another car there. It's so easy to do on these warm-up laps. The acceleration of a Formula 1 car is so mighty that if you're just squirting it to warm up your rear tyres as the driver in front finishes and starts braking, I have seen cars run into each other on warm-up laps, and you have to be very, very careful. And you'll see they'll all stay to the left and peel off right to try not to pick up too much rubbish and bits of old tyre rubber from the many other races we've had here at Albert Park.
Michael Schumacher then 3 times a winner here in the last 4 years. Alongside him, Rubens Barrichello. Behind Schumacher, Juan Pablo Montoya, twice on the podium in the last 2 years. The long winter of waiting is over. 58 laps of the Australian Grand Prix will begin when everybody has formed up on the grid. There's the lap counter on the top left-hand side of your screens. You can count that down with us as the race goes on. But for now, turn up your volume buttons and enjoy the sound of 20 Formula 1 cars throwing themselves down towards the first corner, and the 2004 World Championship begins now! Cracking start by Alonso. Look at Alonso on the grass. He's attacked Montoya, but Montoya's fighting back, and Alonso has to yield. 2 Ferraris, 1 and 2 in the corner. Montoya runs wide. Alonso goes through, and Montoya definitely lost space there, and Jenson Button holds on to his 4th place. But a cracking start by Fernando Alonso.
Yes, indeed. It'd be good to see a replay of that. I'm sure we'll get one shortly, but Montoya in all sorts of trouble down to that first corner. Now he's even behind his teammate, Ralf Schumacher, back there in 5th or 6th place. Coulthard got away well. Raikkonen had a very poor start, I saw out of the window, and so did Mark Webber, I believe, in the Jaguar, not immediately get away well. He's down to 8th place.
So as they make their way round on the first lap, Michael Schumacher leads from Rubens Barrichello. Alonso is 3rd, Button is 4th, 5th, Jarno Trulli. Another great start for him in the Renault. Ralf Schumacher up to 6th, 7th, Juan Pablo Montoya from 3rd on the grid. Mark Webber is 8th, Sato is 9th, David Coulthard is up to 10th place. That's where his teammate Raikkonen started. Raikkonen dropped down to 13th. Here's his cracking scrap, though, on the track, as you can see, between, that looks like Massa and Raikkonen.
Yes, indeed, Raikkonen trying to make up now. He really, and he tremendously fast under braking for turn 13 there. Raikkonen just bogged down on the lines, looking out of the window, just did not get away at all, and had to sort of relaunch the car away. Schumacher leads from Barrichello, Alonso, Button then safely in 4th. Trulli's done well up there in 5th place. Ralf Schumacher Juan Pablo Montoya, Mark Webber, Sato, Coulthard 10.
Yeah, it's not the start at all that Juan Pablo Montoya had in mind. He was talking to you on the grid. Could he live with the red cars? We were asking him, but certainly making life very difficult for himself here in the first Grand Prix by dropping from 3rd down to 7th. Worse news for him, he's got his teammate Ralf Schumacher alongside him. There they are, and Montoya has got past him.
Yep, past him under braking for turn 3, where Ralf Schumacher was so cautious in qualifying and making the team spit a few feathers because he lost 7/10 under the first 2 braking zones. There are now the 2 McLarens, line astern. At the moment, no way past Sato in 9th for Coulthard. But for me, James, it's very significant that Alonso has made it up into 3rd place and is keeping the Ferraris well in sight. If we're right about that, Renault being very good in a longer run under race conditions.
Yes, well, we're talking about the strategy of the races here, typically a 1 or 2 stop race, but they've made the pit lane faster now. The speed limit now 60 miles an hour. It's up from 45 miles an hour last season. And the pit lane itself is shorter, so they're trying to encourage people to make more stops, and certainly the indications are the guys who qualified towards the front are going to make 3 stops here this afternoon, or certainly was carrying a 3-stop fuel load at the start of the race. They can change their strategy as they go along. You might see them running a longer middle stint, but Alonso, we sense, is running perhaps a little bit more fuel than the people around him, and if that's the case, given the way the Renault, as I say, is very gentle on its rear Michelin tyres, he could be sitting in the pound seats here this afternoon, certainly looking good for a podium finish.
Now, we saw Coulthard in the front of your picture now, flying through the air in his qualifying lap. He did damage some aerodynamic pieces, but he was allowed to replace them under the Parc Fermé regulations. They were given permission to make those repairs, so his car should be in reasonable condition. Michael Schumacher was equal fastest on the previous lap on a 1 minute 25.9. That's a pretty massive race pace already, isn't it?
That's quick.
Unbelievable. They pulled 4/10 away from Alonso.
Indeed they have. Schumacher leading Barrichello by 1.1 seconds. Alonso a further 1.3 behind Barrichello. Jenson Button keeping Alonso in sight. He's just under 2 seconds behind the Renault, with Jarno Trulli a second behind him as we look down at Juan Pablo Montoya, having a look at the back of Jarno Trulli.
So the new graphics this year then on your screen, a different format and more information. Quite clearly that's the gap you can see at the bottom of the screen between Montoya, who's just passed Ralf Schumacher. Montoya 6th, Ralf Schumacher 7th. Looking down the times, interestingly, Montoya in the 26s, as was Alonso, who's up in 3rd. Michael Schumacher's just done a 24.9, a 1 minute 24.9. That is some 2.4 seconds faster than last year's pole on the 3rd lap of the Grand Prix. The Ferraris are absolutely flying. Here's a replay of the start. You can see the green Jaguar of Webber 3 back on the left, very slow away, and still those Renaults quick off the line. Whatever they learned under traction and launch control regulations, they've certainly put it into play as well for the driver control systems. Both Renaults flying, and it looks as if Montoya got too much wheel spin, and look at that. Trulli and Alonso already all over him, and now he goes in too deep, locks the wheel onto the grass and loses out badly. There's another angle, and there is Montoya just locking that unloaded inside right front, and you lose so much deceleration. Your front tyre's doing most of the braking. You've got about 58% of your braking energy through the front, and you just cannot slow down.
Let's see if we can find out a little bit more as we look here at Raikkonen slicing past the Sauber. We saw that as it happened earlier on. Let's see if we can find out a bit more from Ted about Montoya's start.
Been into Williams, James. Not only was there too much wheel spin, but he also felt the Ferraris took them around the parade lap too slowly. He didn't get enough heat into his tyres. They didn't bite, and that's how he lost out. I think as they start to warm up now, his pace should increase.
Yes, he's going okay. He's in relatively clear air. He's doing 26.8, but the Ferraris are doing 24.5 now for Michael Schumacher. 24.5. Incredible pace.
Well, I remind you that the 2 Ferraris out front are running on the Bridgestone tyre, and certainly they came in for a lot of criticism last year, the big Japanese tyre manufacturer, about their performance. Certainly through the summer, where Schumacher, you will recall, was lapped in the Hungarian Grand Prix, a massive indignity for him on his way to a 6th world title. But they've certainly put a lot of work in over the winter, and full credit to Bridgestone. They play a lot of the responsibility for the performance of Ferrari here this weekend. You can see them starting to put some space between themselves and Alonso now is down to Bridgestone. Alonso, the first of the runners on the Michelin tyres. Button, Trulli, Montoya, Ralf Schumacher, Webber behind, all on the Michelin tyres as well. It'll be interesting to see how the two different tyres perform over the early stages of this Grand Prix. This is lap 5.
I think where Ferrari have surprised everybody, apparently Bridgestone had 2 programs running, one for the construction of the tyre and the other for the compound of the rubber that goes on it, and they brought them together, the best of each together at the last minute, and they were flying in the Imola test that they had just before they came down here. And this is just about 3 seconds a lap faster than last year's Grand Prix, and that is some kind of progress. I know we had inclement weather, but that is amazing.
We're on board here with Giancarlo Fisichella. Ahead of us is Nick Heidfeld, who left the Sauber team at the end of last season and joined Jordan for this year. He is now in front of his old team. This is the battle for 14th place on the grid. There is another Sauber in front of them, and that's Felipe Massa, who is currently 12th. Nice onboard shot then from Fisichella's car, hoping for a lot from his move to the Sauber team, but so far Sauber not really got that car working well.
Yes, Fisichella, of course, moving out of the Jordan, and he would not expect to be following it in the Grand Prix. You can see the T-cameras, the T-bars, the camera on the top of their airbox there, both with day glow on them. The first numbered runner in each team has to have this identification on the top of the car, so it's easier for us to spot the drivers this year. And it seems as if he's quite a bit faster, but at the moment Fisichella then tucked right up behind Heidfeld.
So where are the passing places on this Albert Park circuit then, Martin?
Quite difficult, because although they're long straights, the braking areas are so small, it's difficult to get there. Heidfeld there just touching the grass, but if you get a run on anybody, you should be able to sneak up the inside of them under braking and force your way through. But you've got to work at it, get yourself in position as you enter the straight. That's not always easy to do, as you lose the aerodynamic effect from the turbulence given off by the car in front.
Well, there's a big queue developing behind Takuma Sato in 7th place. David Coulthard stuck in that. We think Jarno Trulli is holding up Juan Pablo Montoya, possibly the two of them on different strategies. This race developing very nicely on lap 7. Michael Schumacher leads it from Rubens Barrichello, 2.3 seconds behind. Alonso is 3rd, Button 4th, Trulli 5th, and Montoya is 6th. Lap 8 of the Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park in Melbourne. Michael Schumacher leading Rubens Barrichello by just over 2 seconds. Nothing has changed. Fernando Alonso is still 3rd, keeping in touch with them. He is 6.3 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher after 7 laps. Button, though, dropping back a little bit. He's over 6 seconds now behind Fernando Alonso. His pace just under a second a lap slower than that of the Renault of Alonso, who in turn is about 0.8 of a second a lap slower than the Ferraris at the moment.
Barrichello just put in a new lap record of 1:24.4. Michael Schumacher is in the middle of responding to that. The gap is 2.2 seconds. Ruben was just beginning to ease it back. We're about to see a lap record smashed again, I think, if Michael Schumacher has a good run through to the end of the lap. He's just enjoying himself. And this young man Alonso is hanging on somehow, thank goodness for us. And he's still in the hunt somewhere, because everybody else are seconds adrift. There'll be questions asked of McLaren. They're currently running 3.5 seconds slower than the leaders. and that's a 24.170 for Michael Schumacher, way quicker than pole position, matched by Barrichello on the same lap, all bar 9,000ths of a second. It's like they're in a different formula, James.
It is, although you have to say, Martin, that there are a couple of queues being formed here. There's the one behind Jarno Trulli, which contains the two Williams cars. Montoya, we think, is on a slightly different strategy from Jarno Trulli and possibly being held up there. And this is the other problem here. Takuma Sato, although Coulthard not that close to him, Raikkonen you can see, and Massa behind them. But Sato is doing pretty slow lap times in comparison with the men in front of him. And I wonder whether perhaps McLaren do have a bit more pace if they just get themselves in front of Sato.
I don't think David's close enough to be worrying Sato too much, and therefore we have Fisichella in the Sauber. But it's interesting to me that Massa is beginning, who's in 12th, beginning to hustle Raikkonen and Coulthard, just to demonstrate, I think, that the Bridgestones in these heat conditions and on this track are far, far superior, and that is why the Ferraris are romping away at the front. They've got the best car and the best tyres.
On a cool day, the track temperature 26 degrees, the air temperature 19. It's as chilly as it's been throughout this weekend here in Melbourne. It was quite warm earlier in the weekend, very sunny when we arrived here, in fact, midweek. They've been having record temperatures through the late part of the summer here in Australia, over 40 degrees a couple of weeks ago, but no sign of that today, and that is to the great advantage of Ferrari and Bridgestone, whose tyres tend to like the colder weather, and to the disadvantage of Michelin and its partners, Williams, Renault, McLaren and Jaguar and BAR. They tend to perform much better in the hotter climates. We saw Giancarlo Fisichella making a very early pit stop. I think that was probably because he felt he was being held up by Nick Heidfeld, and he was going to have to stop anyway in the next 3 or 4 laps. May as well do it now and get clear of Heidfeld. You're riding on board then with Raikkonen, looking back at Felipe Massa, who's having no trouble staying with the McLaren at all. Look at this.
Massa's Ferrari engine, he's gone up the inside. Did he get through? Yes, he did get through, unless he disappeared somewhere. Massa has repassed Kimi Raikkonen. There you saw it. He got in the slip. He was quicker off the last corner, got in the slipstream and was faster down the straight. And there's Raikkonen. He's got some problem. It looks like the rear locked up. It looks like the engine died because both his rear tyres suddenly locked. And that is why he got passed down the straight that easily, I think. Just the engine going a bit sick, and then it's blown up and locked up immediately. Nothing you can do about that unless you pull the clutch in immediately. But then as soon as the engine stops, the hydraulic pressure fades away and the clutch re-engages anyway. And that is an engine failure for Kimi Raikkonen.
Yes, you can see the smoke pouring out of the airbox. And I think the body language of Kimi Raikkonen says it all, as does the body language of Ron Dennis we saw there up on the pit wall. This, I'm sorry to say, is no great surprise. McLaren having to run the car, the engine, a very low regime in order to make it last. And you can see that's how Massa cut through. He almost didn't make the pass stick. Raikkonen tried to get back round the outside, and then you could see that Raikkonen's rear wheels lock up, Martin, and that is clearly the engine. They've had really real problems with that, haven't they? They've been treating it like a porcelain vase all weekend, just babying it as Montoya dives into the pits.
Yes, they must have dropped it then because that one's broken. So Montoya then pitting. The leaders are on lap 11, and that for me is a great surprise. We thought Williams might be running more fuel than probably anybody else, given that we were expecting such an electric pace from them. And they weren't that hot in qualifying, and therefore we hoped they were going to go further. But Montoya then, the second man to pit. Yellow flags are out because of Raikkonen's stranded car there.
But I do wonder, he was in that queue behind Trulli, and I just do wonder, they must have realised that Trulli was perhaps carrying more fuel and he was on a hiding to nothing. I think they've rolled the dice here, Sam Michael and the team in the Williams strategy wall. They brought him in on lap 10, but there was a long stationary time, and into the pits comes Rubens Barrichello, I think that is, in the Ferrari. Michael Schumacher goes across the start-finish line. So, yes, obviously everyone carrying quite low fuel. But Montoya put in a lot of fuel on his first stop. Let's see what Ferrari do.
With this advantage, I wonder if Ferrari will refuel this a bit longer now and turn it into a two-stopper with a short first stint. New tyres going on. A lot of fuel going in there. About 7 seconds worth, James. So that's not going to go that far, is it? If they were converting the strategy, it would have been 9 or 10 seconds, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's about 45 kilos of fuel in there, which probably enough for about 15 to 16 laps. So that's an interesting choice there by the Ferrari team for Rubens Barrichello.
And Alonso pitted from third place at the same time. Coulthard still tucked up behind Sato then it was, as Button, who was also stopped, rejoins the racetrack. Jenson Button was pretty much on his own, but running strongly in 4th place. Is this the day he's going to get that first podium?
Well, he's been 5 times finishing in 4th place. Is this the day he's going to get it indeed? And Ferrari look like they're ready again for Michael Schumacher. Williams appear to be ready for Ralf Schumacher. Michael Schumacher leading the Grand Prix. Ralf Schumacher down in 4th place at the moment. Just to remind you how this works, they had to qualify yesterday with the fuel with which they would start the race. So obviously you don't want to go too far into the race because you don't want to carry too much fuel in qualifying. But you also want to be able to go a decent distance. Here comes Michael down the pit lane, and Ted will take us through.
Well, Michael Schumacher, 100 kilometres an hour. He's got to watch it because Williams are still in the pit lane for Ralf Schumacher. They've been there over a lap now. The tyres are changing, no problems with the stop. Here he goes, it's long. It is long. Oh, it is long. Off it goes. What's the time on there? 9.4. That's a switch to a 2-stop. What do you reckon?
I reckon they were slow getting the refueler off, Ted, so it's difficult to know, but the fuel would have been going in nonetheless. And they had to have 3 or 4 tugs to get that off. Michael still got out in the lead of the Grand Prix. He had 2 or 3 second advantage anyway over Rubens, but there finally Ralf comes in. The team are not really allowed to send their mechanics out until the car's just about to come in, but clearly Ralf either missed his signal to come in or elected to take another lap. And out behind him also goes Jarno Trulli. So now we'll see how it unfolds after the first stop. Coulthard then hasn't stopped yet. He looks like he's just about the longest runner. Nor is Mark Webber. Mark Webber up to 3rd place too now in the Jaguar.
Well, Ralf Schumacher got out in front of the Sauber there of Felipe Massa, who certainly seems to be punching above his weight at the moment, but he hasn't made his first pit stop yet. But also Jarno Trulli lost out a little bit in that. He has now dropped behind the Williams of Ralf Schumacher. So that's a switch in the pit stops. Ralf Schumacher a winner there.
Yeah, and he's ahead of Montoya too. So Montoya really, if he did stop early to get through the traffic, it certainly didn't pay off for him. Montoya well tucked up there, look, coming through the back of this picture.
Yeah, we didn't exactly see what happened to Montoya during the course of that pit stop sequence there for Trulli, Ralf Schumacher et al. But certainly something's happened to Montoya because he's now 28.9 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher in 10th place. At the moment, Michael Schumacher leading from Rubens Barrichello. This is lap 14, and Webber is coming into the pits from 3rd place, so Alonso moves up into 3rd place. Coulthard there has not stopped yet, so perhaps McLaren running a little bit more fuel in their strategy, starting to pay off for them. You can see the field spacing out a little bit as Mark Webber makes the Jaguar first pit stop, and that clock was not right. It was about 8 seconds, I think, so Webber looks like he's on a 2-stopper.
You were right about Coulthard being held up behind Sato. He's now going 1.5 seconds a lap faster, so although he didn't look that close, this is what the drivers have been saying. Even if you get within 1.5 seconds of the guy in front, you're already beginning to hurt. Such is the way the aerodynamics are on these cars now. They're so efficient, they seem to be so easily destabilized by the turbulent air from another car. Maybe they've got to do more work in wind tunnels with one car following the other to do something about this.
Well, you can see that we've already passed one of the Minardis. Already been lapped. Jolt Baumgartner and Gian-Maria Bruni there falling into the clutches of the 2 Ferraris, and this is only lap 14 of the 58-lap Grand Prix. I think part of the problem for Montoya is that his refueling was slow, and whether or not he took on 10 seconds worth of fuel. There's you can see Massa running wide.
I think it was Fisichella, wasn't it? But the problem for him there was the Toyota was just cruising into the corner and basically caught him out. Presumably that was D'Amato. Fisichella was about to catch him. The Toyota was just snail-like in the braking zone. Whether D'Amato's got a problem, we don't know.
Well, Toyota haven't really been on it at all this weekend, have they? Mike Gascoigne, the technical director of Renault, left over the winter as McLaren get ready for a pit stop for one of their, well, for David Coulthard, Kimi Raikkonen being out of the race, and in he comes.
Yes, Raikkonen out of the Grand Prix. That's the first engine failure we've seen this weekend under these new regulations, where the engines have to basically be like pit puppets for the weekend. And away goes Coulthard with a bit of a stutter there, but back into the race. If he is on a 2-stopper, he may just be in better shape towards the end of the Grand Prix.
If he can get his engine to last, as we were saying before, McLaren having to be very, very gentle with them this weekend, and they did very few laps in the Friday practice and indeed Saturday morning practice before qualifying. They're very, very concerned about the reliability of this new Mercedes-Benz engine.
Well, Rubens then is now down to just 1.4 behind. We think Michael is carrying a bit more fuel. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't think it necessarily was. When they're trying to pull that thing off and it won't come off, it just always seems it's heavy and it's tight. Something you can barely lift by yourself, those refueling rigs. And so Michael is weighed down. Remember, there's 13 litres per second pouring into the car. And maybe this is the moment when Rubens can make a bit of ground back up on the world champion. We're on board then with Sato, and he is down now in 11th place.
And in front of him, the Jaguar of Christian Klein, our first sighting of the rookie driver, teammate to Mark Webber. Just 20 years old, the Austrian. He's been thrown into Formula One this year as partner to Webber. That's a pretty tall order for anybody, but he looks like quite a promising racing driver, Klein. As I say, he's only 20 years old, but a good Formula 3 career last year, and he has had a very solid performance so far here at Albert Park this weekend. His qualifying yesterday was ruined by a hydraulic problem on the car. He wasn't able to set a lap in the second qualifying session, but I've been impressed with him throughout the practice sessions and the first qualifying, and he looks quite a promising driver. David Richards there, team boss of the BAR team. Their man Jenson Button still holding on to 4th place behind Fernando Alonso 3rd, and then the 2 Ferraris in front of them. Little puff of smoke there out of the back of Ralf Schumacher's Williams as he closes up on the back of Jenson Button to develop a battle for 4th place, and we've got a Minardi going slowly.
Yes, Klein's not stopped in the Jaguar yet. 2 drivers yet to pit then. Klein in 10th and Pantano in 13th place for Jordan. But is Ralf Schumacher now beginning to relentlessly pursue Jenson Button? The Williams much faster under braking. So BAR's not. We did hear that they struggled a bit on the longer runs, which I think is what's given Jenson a car that delivers quickly on a single flying lap. But right now, the Williams looks the faster package there as they begin to fight over 4th place.
Well, you can see now on board with Ralf Schumacher, that's Jenson Button up in front. Martin, it's extraordinary really the progress that BAR have made over the winter. Jeffrey Willis, who was formerly head of aerodynamics for the Williams team before he switched over to BAR to become technical director, he reckons they found 2 seconds over the winter between the chassis, the engine and the tyres, and that's a tremendous amount to find over one winter, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's everything. I was surprised just how high their engine is revving now when we saw it through qualifying with the new graphics that we have. And they've got their carbon gearbox on and all sorts of nice bits and pieces on the car. Button is pumped up and driving very, very well. But for some reason, in this stage of the Grand Prix, he's fading away from the pace. And I have to say, the Ferraris have backed off as well up front, haven't they? They're 9 seconds clear of Alonso, but they've stopped pumping in those stellar lap times.
Yeah, well, if you can call 1 minute 25.7 slow, that's certainly a pretty heavy pace for anybody else. Sato getting very crossed up there and going out onto the grass, going a little bit perhaps too deep on the brakes into turn 1. Sato in 10th place behind the McLaren of David Coulthard. This lap 18 then, Michael Schumacher leading Rubens Barrichello by just under 2 seconds. Alonso 3rd, Button 4th, Ralf Schumacher 5th, and 6th, Jarno Trulli. Lap 19 of the Australian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello put a lap on Christian Klein in the Jaguar, who has just made his first Formula One pit stop. And and he has rejoined in 16th place. We have 18 cars still running. Zolt Baumgartner has retired in the Minardi, and Kimi Räikkönen we saw spectacularly locking up the rear wheels when the engine failed in the McLaren earlier on lap 9. So 18 cars in it. Schumacher leads Barrichello. Less than a second now between them as Barrichello gets close to the back of the 6-time world champion. Fernando Alonso is 8 seconds behind Barrichello in 3rd place. Button then in 4th. Ralf Schumacher right behind Jenson Button. Good scrap developing there for 4th place. Trulli 6th. 7th Montoya, who had a very poor start to this Grand Prix, went from 3rd on the grid down to 7th at the end of the first lap. And Mark Webber is still going strong in the Jaguar in the last of the points-paying positions in 8th place. And you can see now that there is the Williams of Juan Pablo Montoya trying, as he has for most of this Grand Prix really, to get past Jarno Trulli.
Yes, there's something curious. I think drivers are finding their cars are either hooked up completely or nowhere. We've got Alonso doing 1 minute 25.7, and then his teammate Trulli.
Oh, Martin, sorry. That was spectacular spin.
Yeah. And then we've got Trulli in the 1 minute 27's best part of a second and a half per lap slower. Jenson Button struggling for pace too, although he's hanging on to 4th place just, as you can see there.
That was some kind of spin by Felipe Massa. Complete 360 job, managed to come out pointing in the right direction. What does that feel like?
As long as you don't point in the wrong direction or hit something very hard, it feels not too bad actually, but if it surprises you, you begin to be very cautious then. If you're not absolutely clear why it happened, and sometimes you can be a little surprised, you don't see oil on the track or whatever, then you begin to think, well, what's going wrong here? Massa reminds me a bit of Sato. They're both incredibly fast, but just always looking slightly out of control. And we've seen both of them then have moments in this Grand Prix so far.
Well, Ralf Schumacher is all over the back of Jenson Button at the moment in the battle for 4th place. And we're noting also that both the Renaults in clear air, and Trulli's strategy, I wonder, it might well be different from Alonso's. He's running 1.4 seconds a lap slower than his teammate, and that would indicate they're doing different things. And that's really bad news for Juan Pablo Montoya if that's the case. Lovely onboard shot here as the BMW engine revs to almost 19,000 RPM around this track. Huge amount of stress going through these engines. It really is remarkable that they can expect them to last a whole Grand Prix weekend. Something in the region of 500 miles at this kind of performance level. Ted has news for us.
Down at BAR, James, you're talking about Takuma Sato. They think he's lost or damaged rather, his front nose, his front wing, because he's lost front downforce. He's complaining about that on the radio. They can't just bring him in and change it now, but look out for him in his next stop. They may well change the nose then.
He's still on pace though. He's still quicker than Coulthard, who's in front of him, and quicker than Webber too. Webber 8th, Coulthard 9th, Sato 10th. The BAR still got good pace, even if he has damaged it. Toyota has had a bit of a disastrous weekend. You've got Damata down in 13th, Panis, who started near the back of the grid, still running in 17th. Both of them with very little pace indeed.
Yeah, that new car of a Toyota is described as being fairly ordinary. It's a step forward from last year, according to technical director Mike Gascoigne, but he's got a lot of development planned for that car throughout the season. And he described the engine as a World Championship winning engine, so clearly that's not part of the problem as the Toyota gets out of the way to be lapped by this scrap here. This the battle for 4th place. Jenson Button, once the teammate back in 2000 at Williams of Ralf Schumacher, certainly showed him a thing or two towards the end of that season, didn't he, Martin? And made people ask some questions about Ralf Schumacher and ask even more questions about Jenson Button and what he might achieve. Now, with the BAR team holding off Ralf Schumacher, and there you can see Jarno Trulli trying to hold off Juan Montoya, who's going to make a move on him, getting pretty frustrated, I would imagine, the Colombian now. He really wants to get past this Renault.
Yeah, it's not enough of a braking zone there. You've got to be alongside before you can make it stick there. But, it's Montoya really getting frustrated, you can see, and this race has not unfolded anything like he expected before he stepped on the plane to Australia, and even sitting on the grid in 3rd place. But, so Michael Schumacher leads by 1.8 seconds now, further 9 seconds behind them, just hanging on to Alonso. And then we've got Button, 32 seconds off the lead now, closely followed by Ralf Schumacher. And the fight between Trulli and Montoya is another 5 seconds adrift. Webber's not flying in 8th, nor is Coulthard in 9th. There's a lot of disappointing performances out there today in terms of actual pace, no doubt about it.
Yeah, we heard Ron Dennis telling us before the race that he was driving, his team was going to be driving for points today. I think they realised that they lacked speed, the McLarens. They needed to just play a percentage game as the Renault of Trulli and the Williams of Montoya put another lap on that Toyota. But a number of people here will be looking to get some points in the bag just to get off the mark, because Ferrari do seem to be very strong here. But it's an 18-race World Championship. We go through places where the track temperature is going to be through the roof. All kinds of situations are going to unfold, no doubt. And it would be very foolish to think that it's a Ferrari whitewash season again. But certainly here at Albert Park, where they've always been very strong, at the moment they have the upper hand, and it's up to these guys to do as much as they can to get the maximum points here to open their account for the season.
It is indeed truly Montoya, then 7/10 of a second it says on the caption, but you can see it for yourself. And there then the length of the pit straight just about behind the other scrap of Button and Ralf Schumacher. It's a long pit straight here, mind you. Williams looks very stiffly sprung, even though yesterday I said it was very good across the curves, which it does appear to be. It's very, very stiffly sprung. You can see it working away on the bumps compared to the Renault, for example.
It's interesting, a moment ago we had a graphics looking at the top speeds, 323 kilometers an hour, which is just under 200 miles an hour, isn't it? So I know the drivers can adjust the engine mix from the cockpit. Then obviously they turn it down for the early part of the weekend where they don't want to overstress the engine. They can turn it up, and Patrick Head was saying that they actually have an adjustment in the cockpit. They can actually turn it up if they want some peak revs just to make an overtaking move. It's almost like a go faster switch in the cockpit.
Yeah, I can imagine they'll give the driver some over-rev capacity, but I doubt they'd let a simple racing driver mess around with the fuel mixture on these things, not when they're running at 19,000 RPM. They leave that in the capable hands of a computer. But the driver certainly has a little bit of leeway on the revs in case they're in a tow situation where they're getting sucked along by another car. And I can see Montoya getting frustrated with this one anytime soon and having a bit of a lunge.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Ted has some more news for us down in the pits.
Well, looking at the strategies of these two guys, James, Trulli stopped 2 laps later than Montoya. They had similar fuel times, even though the Williams pit stop actually took longer. So that means, of course, that Trulli will stop 2 laps later after Montoya. So Juan Pablo really needs to get by. That's why he's pushing so hard.
Well, we will see. Michael Schumacher on lap 24, 2.5 seconds clear of Rubens Barrichello. And we were talking about how the pace had dropped off slightly of the Ferraris. Clearly a big part of that had to do with having just taken on some fuel, because now Michael Schumacher, as the fuel is burning off, getting that back into the 1:24 range, picking the pace up quite a bit. Rubens Barrichello keeping him honest. And I've been impressed, Martin, by Rubens Barrichello. I mean, here today, he's obviously playing the role behind, 2.5 seconds behind his teammate. But he's made his point, hasn't he? He's never been more than just a few hundredths of a second in any session slower than Michael this weekend. And he's right on Schumacher's pace nowadays, isn't he?
Yeah, but it's not enough, is it, really? He's got to be ahead of it somehow, because Michael always seems to just make those little extra moments in the traffic, off the start, in qualifying, gets it on pole, on the clean side of the grid. All those tiny little things make the difference. And look at this then. Finally, we're cut away just as I think Montoya was going to get the job done, and indeed he has. Truly tries to fight back, but he's showboating because Montoya has the position.
Yeah, that was very, very unfortunate. Just as Montoya made the move, directed cut to the pits. Nevertheless, he's made the pass stick, and Montoya finally, look at it, out of the final corner. It's almost as if he hits the go faster button and says, get out of my way, I am coming through. He is lengths ahead now of Trulli as he goes down into turn 1, finally free of that Renault. Now we'll see how fast Montoya is.
And Louise has Kimi Räikkönen down in the pits.
Kimi, I know you've had a chance to have a good look at the telemetry with the engineers. Has it given you any indication of exactly what the problem was?
I think so. We lost the water pressure, and then in the end the engine gave up, but it was very disappointing.
The team have made it quite clear that there is more development to come from this car, but nonetheless, have you been a bit disappointed by your pace this weekend?
Yeah, for sure. We wasn't expecting to driving on 10th place and not going anywhere, and it's for sure disappointing because we shouldn't be on that position. We should be fighting on the first place, and I think so no one is happy.
First start under the new regulations, how do you think it went?
It didn't change for us anything.
Thanks, Kimi.
He doesn't sound too happy, but I would imagine Montoya was happy. We kept seeing replays of his very clean move on Trulli. He went to block him on the way out of the corner, which, strictly speaking, you're not allowed to do. You're allowed to move across the racetrack once. You cannot weave. And nonetheless, Montoya now straight into the 1 minute 26s. Trulli slipping back to 1 minute 28, and really not on a great pace. And he will start coming under pressure from Mark Webber soon too, will Jarno Trulli.
So Montoya stuck behind Trulli for a full 10 laps, and that will certainly have made a major impact on his Grand Prix effort. He's now up into 6th place, 5 seconds behind teammate Ralf Schumacher, who seems to be struggling a bit for pace at the moment.
Yeah, but something's just happened to Alonso. Alonso's just done a very, very slow lap, and that's why Ralf Schumacher is suddenly up behind him. So 4th place now, there's just 9/10 of a second in. There it is in front of your eyes. So I don't know whether he had a mistake, and it was his out lap from his pit stop, but even so, it was very slow.
Here we can see that moment of Sato again, up onto the grass, down into his 10th place, as he's been for most of the Grand Prix. Takuma Sato having an eventful afternoon on his return to Grand Prix racing. He raced, of course, in 2002 with the Jordan team before sitting out last season as the BAR test driver. Got the one opportunity to race at Suzuka, the final Grand Prix of the season, where he scored some points. That gave him a lot of confidence going into this Grand Prix, but he's been a little bit ragged this afternoon. Teammate Button, though, is dropping Ralf Schumacher, and as a result of Alonso's 2nd pit stop, has gone up into 3rd place. So Schumacher, Barrichello, the top two, 40 seconds now clear, if you please, of this man Jenson Button, who dives into the pits, which will hand 3rd place back to Fernando Alonso. Also diving into the pits is Juan Pablo Montoya from 6th place. So poor guy's going to be behind Trulli again, I think, when he comes out, which is not his idea of a happy day. A little bit of a problem getting the fuel hose off Button's car.
He's away cleanly, though. He's going out of the pits in front of us in the comm box here, and there seems a problem, the left front problem there for Montoya. Lost another 2 or 3 seconds, and that will surely, any advantage he made over Trulli in those 2 laps as he pitted, he will surely have lost there. And he can't even take fuel on board at that moment. So it's just not working out for Juan Pablo Montoya at all today. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher leads by 2.9 seconds now then from Barrichello.
Well, Montoya must wonder a little bit about what this track has for him in terms of bad luck. Last year, remember, he was leading the race with only about 10 laps to go, and he spun, and that allowed David Coulthard through to take the victory, and Montoya came home a rather bedraggled and sad 2nd place. He's been 2nd for the last 2 years here, and he'll be doing well if he can get back up there this year. It's, as you can see, that's the top 8 at the moment, and that's the fuel strategy as it's played out. So you can see the Ferraris did take on that little bit more fuel in their first stop. They'd switched from a 3 to a 2-stop strategy. And Ross Brawn on the pit wall, masterminding Ferrari's strategy once again, seems to have it all very nicely under control at the moment.
Ralf Schumacher, now he's got sight of Alonso. Although Alonso's stopped twice and he's only stopped once, so they're out of sync, really. Alonso running a little bit wide there, but suddenly Ralph's down in the low. Now he's on a 125.9. Somebody in the Williams pit is going to be saying, where did that suddenly come from, Ralf? Mark Webber pits 2 out of 6th place.
Yeah, well, they pitted a lap apart, Alonso and Ralf Schumacher, so I think that, I imagine Ralf Schumacher must be making his 2nd stop any time now. Here comes Webber. He pitted on lap 13 originally, and here he is again now on lap 28. Taking on some more fuel, going back out into the field, and I think he'll rejoin around 9th place, so just out of the points. That will push David Coulthard up into 8th place in the final points-paying positions. So let me give you the order on lap 29. Michael Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello, Fernando Alonso, the front 3. Ralf Schumacher 4th, Trulli 5th. Buttons down to 6th now after his 2nd stop. Montoya 7th, Coulthard 8th. That's the points-paying positions. Takuma Sato has just made a pit stop as well.
Webber cleanly out of the pits then, as is Sato, and underway once more. Ralf Schumacher pits then, as expected, so the 2nd stop of the afternoon for Ralf Schumacher. Clearly they've gone to and remain on a 3-stopper. I don't know what McLaren are doing with Coulthard, but it seems as if probably Coulthard, Webber and Klein are the only solid 2-stoppers of the afternoon.
Approaching half distance then in this Australian Grand Prix. Ralf Schumacher, everything neat and tight. A little bit of a jump there off the clutch, but he rejoins the fray. had a bit of a ragged afternoon here last year and picked up only a couple of points, or 1 point in fact, but today running in 4th place before he made that pit stop. Interesting to see where he comes out relative to Jenson Button, because those two are having a really good scrap before the second round of pit stops. Into the pits comes Barrichello.
I wonder how fast these Ferraris could go if somebody was chasing them. Michael's just set another new lap record on a 1:24.1, just responding to Rubens. Pushed him again, got the gap down to around 2, so Michael just said, OK, I'll just go a little bit faster and spoil that run. That's a lovely stop for Ferrari. That even's working better than anybody else for them today. And away he goes then. As soon as he crosses that white line on the way out of the pits, he's away. He must not cross the right line that runs down the middle of the racetrack, as you know, until he's past the end of it and joined the racing line. And a lovely clear track in front of him and behind him. When it's working well, everything falls into place.
It really does, doesn't it? Well, you were talking there about Michael Schumacher responding because Rubens Barrichello was pressuring him, but Rubens is now re-signed for another couple of years at Ferrari. Michael's already won 6 World Championships. What do you think the balance of play is within that team? Are they allowed to race each other now, do you think?
Yes, I think that they are. I'd like to think that, that he's got every chance of racing, but you just know that if there's 5 good engines, the very best one, Michael will get it. He will always get the best that's in the team, even if it's only 2 horsepower more. It'll go his way, and all the best pieces inevitably head in Michael's direction, I would have thought. He is the team leader, he is the world champion, and he's earned that right in many respects.
And Rubens has signed up for another few years of it. Well, we'll see. Down the pit lane comes Michael Schumacher on lap 30.
I wouldn't be a front jackman for all the tea in China. Coming in at 100 kilometres, that's 62 miles an hour. Don't stand on the road and wave somebody down who's doing 62 miles an hour. And anyway, that's what they do for a living, and they're good men.
And there you can see the margin as Schumacher emerges in front of Rubens Barrichello, about half the length of the pit straight here at Albert Park between the two. And it was 2.3 seconds before that round of pit stops for Ferrari. We'll see what it is when we rejoin. But that lap of Michael Schumacher's, that 1:24.1, almost indecently fast around this racetrack. He is back out in front. Alonso still 3rd, but now half a minute behind the 2 Ferraris. Ralf Schumacher is 4th, Jenson Button 5th, Juan Montoya 6th, Jarno Trulli 7th, and David Coulthard holding on to, clinging to a point in 8th place. Massa's having a good day this afternoon, isn't he, Martin? We've seen him quite a few times punching above his weight, and he's currently in 9th place and ahead of Mark Webber, but Webber has just made a second pit stop, which Massa has not done yet.
Yes, he is. He's outperforming Fisichella by miles. Fisichella tucked down in 14th place, lapping around the same speed as the Jordans, whereas Massa's up there hustling Coulthard. So not exactly right behind him, but matching him on lap time. On board then with David Coulthard, heading down to what I think is the infamous turn 3. Indeed it is. And let's see if we can get a feel for why this McLaren is not delivering any kind of race pace. Nowhere near flat through turn 5. Very hesitant on turn in, but the balance looks okay, but he obviously is just having to hold it to a certain speed. I know in high-speed corners in qualifying the car was frightening the drivers a little bit, but at the moment Coulthard, I think, just generally lacking overall pace.
It's interesting, it's a shame we haven't got one of the rev counters on this particular onboard. I'd love to see how high they're revving that engine, whether that's part of the reason why he doesn't have the maximum power here today, I'm not sure. But as you say, for whatever reason, David Coulthard and McLaren just not quite at the races at the moment. 67.5 seconds behind the Ferraris after 32 laps. Michael Schumacher then still leading Rubens Barrichello. Alonso 29 seconds behind. 26 laps of this 58-lap Australian Grand Prix still to go. James Allen and Martin Brundle with you at Albert Park in Australia. We're riding on board with Rubens Barrichello, and we are 6 seconds behind the world champion Michael Schumacher after that second round of pit stops. Barrichello lost out quite badly there to Michael Schumacher, who now has quite a comfortable margin over his teammate at the front. Behind them, Fernando Alonso pressing very, very hard, as fast as he can go really in the Renault, and he's really a gutsy and persistent drive by Fernando today in third place, which he got a terrific start off the line and went up from 5th to 3rd, and that really was the platform for him to make this attack, but he really can do nothing about the pace of the Ferraris today. Ralf Schumacher has got ahead of Jenson Button through the pit stop sequence. He's now 4th with Button 5th. But hear this, Montoya closing right in on Jenson Button. Took almost, there he is, Montoya, took almost a second out of Button on the lap before last, and another half second on the last lap. Just over 3 seconds then behind Button. You can see it for yourselves now, and this is the principal interest of the Grand Prix at the moment.
Yeah, sadly, local hero Mark Webber out of the Grand Prix, the 3rd retirement. Webber, Baumgartner, and of course Kimi Räikkönen very early on in the McLaren. But actually, we've got quite a nice situation brewing up, not for Jenson Button, mind you, and presumably that is Jordan passing the Sauber, but I'm wondering if the Sauber was just coming out of the pits or whether it's Fisichella having a ding-dong battle with Nick Heidfeld, and they really are going for it. They're going to interlock wheels if they're not careful, and Heidfeld had to get out of it. Fisichella very feisty there, but I tell you, he did not expect to be racing with Heidfeld this afternoon, and his teammate is up in 9th place. But I was saying there's quite a good little squabble brewing up. Button 5th, Montoya 6th, Trulli 7th, Coulthard 8th. There's about 12 seconds between the lot of them as we head into towards the final stages of the Grand Prix. So there's plenty of racing to go there yet. At the moment, though, the Ferraris are now half a minute clear of Alonso, and Schumacher 7 seconds clear of Barrichello in 2nd place.
Well, you can see here, Fisichella, now he's been able to get past Heidfeld, is pressing on a little bit. These two swap seats over the winter. Fisichella leaving Jordan to go to Sauber, and Heidfeld having been released by Peter Sauber there in the middle of the Sauber timing war there. He didn't want Heidfeld for this year, and he's ended up with Jordan. Here's the move again, and Fisichella really not taking no for an answer.
Little puff of tyre smoke as Heidfeld's left front touched Fisichella's right rear. And this is good driving, good hustling. Two professional, but I guess journeyman Formula One drivers, as their careers have turned out at the moment, having a good, clean fight.
Beitzender there, the team manager of Sauber, obviously not enjoying that moment quite as much as Fisichella. Here's Alonso, all on his own. He's got 25 seconds in front of him between him and the Ferrari Rubens Barrichello, and another 25 behind him is Ralf Schumacher. So a very lonely afternoon for Fernando Alonso. But yet again, Martin, the young man, making a big impression here in Formula One.
Yeah, I think he's probably man of the match so far in terms of driving what he's got underneath him. It's a great car, and he's certainly the only one that's remotely kept the Ferraris in sight. And Alonso going well. I tell you, if we go to Malaysia, where traditionally Ferrari and Bridgestone have struggled, and Ferrari pull this performance out, there's some serious questions to be asked. And I think if I was running Formula One, I'll be going home from Malaysia, if that unfolds that way, asking some big questions. If it's Ferrari dominant and that rather lengthy qualifying procedure we went through yesterday, I think there may well be some changes coming up soon in Formula One in that respect. Not that I'm anti-Ferrari, I'm pro-Ferrari. I love, a good mate of mine is Ross and Rubens and all that, but I'm very pro-Formula One, and these guys have got to close the gap down to Ferrari, and I think we've got to do something about that qualifying session yesterday.
Well, if they're the best, it's up to everybody else to catch them. And certainly this Williams, I think, is a faster car than it's been able to show here this weekend at Albert Park. It's pretty parky today, and the Michelin tyres don't like it in the cold weather as much as the Bridgestones on the Ferrari do. I think Malaysia may well be a different story. Let's hope so. Certainly Renault last year, you recall, Martin, they annexed the front row, Alonso and Trulli, in Malaysia, and they expect to be very, very competitive again there. But certainly Ferrari here are the cream of the crop. A lot of brake dust coming out of off Jenson Button's car, if you notice. Doesn't seem to be as comfortable. You noticed that earlier on when he was fighting against Ralf Schumacher, that the BAR seemed to be not quite so comfortable on the brakes.
No, he's certainly fighting it a bit, and hasn't shown that stunning pace to put him fourth on the grid, that's for sure, but still maintaining fifth. But Montoya now just 7/10 of a second behind him, and we have seen already the Williams very fast under braking. Look, pulling 18,600 RPM. That used to be for motorcycles with very small engines, those numbers. That's incredible from a 3-litre engine. Look at that, how much better Montoya is under braking. And as soon as he can get somewhere near the zone with Button, he'll nail him somewhere in a braking zone, no doubt about it.
This the scrap then for fifth place. Ralf Schumacher is 3.5 seconds up the road and seems to be fairly... he's had a slow last lap, Ralf Schumacher. So I'm not quite sure what happened there. But gathering it together now as Button and Montoya cross the start-finish line. They've got D'Amata, I think it is, in the Toyota. Certainly one of the two. Yes, it is D'Amata in the Toyota in front of them. Down in 14th place is Coulthard pits.
So Coulthard then clearly on a two-stop strategy this afternoon. There'll be quite a lengthy fuel stop there, and the car will be fat when he goes out, but he's away, and he's got a chance of some points. But that's all McLaren can expect today, isn't it? Adrian Newey will be somewhat concerned that this MP419 doesn't appear to have a lot of pace here in Melbourne. And even as the winter testing unfolded, was clearly lacking absolute pace. Toyota having to yield everywhere. That's the second biggest car company in the world and the most profitable. I cannot imagine. Everything else they've done in motor racing, they've gone on to dominate and win in many respects, and they'll have to do something quite big to sort that one out. Obviously, Mike Gascoigne will take quite a while to feed in his knowledge and experience. And look, Montoya feigning a run down the inside, was never going to get through there, but it will distract Jenson, and he knows he's going to pick him off anytime soon.
Well, this is a great scrap, isn't it? The BAR Honda of Jenson Button just holding off Juan Pablo Montoya, and there's a bit of history here with these two. You recall that Button made his debut in Formula 1 with Williams back in 2000. He was moved aside to make way for Montoya, who's now going into his fourth season of Formula 1 with Williams, but he will be leaving the team at the end of the year, and a lot of people believe that Jenson Button is high on Sir Frank Williams' shopping list for next year, along with Mark Webber to replace Montoya, and possibly also Ralf Schumacher if he should make a move too. So quite a lot at stake here, and Sir Frank Williams, I think, will be a very, very interested observer here. He knows what he's got in Juan Montoya. He ran Button when he was a raw youth of 20. Now team leader at BAR. Can he fight off Juan Pablo Montoya? Dickie Stanford there, team manager of Williams, very experienced man, and all the Williams mechanics enjoying this scrap as much as we are.
Michael Schumacher still matching the pole position time on the last lap at 1:24.4. Barrichello 1:26.8. The gap now up to 12.6 seconds. I'll keep an eye on Barrichello's time because he's beginning to slip quite badly now, and even Alonso beginning to edge back towards him. Montoya ever closer to Jenson Button. Jenson under pressure. This is that turn 13 where Montoya is so fast under braking. Jenson forced onto the grass. He will not damage the car. He might collect a bit of rubbish, but he probably was a bit surprised there. He ought to have just closed Montoya down a bit earlier, but Montoya's car superior, under pressure, significantly superior, and well, Jenson still going very well, but now down to 6th place.
Is that a case of nice guys finish second, that move?
No, not at all. No, not at all. But, there was a point where he'd lost the position and he should have just acknowledged it rather than bumping down the grass. But there you go. It's easy standing up here saying that when you're doing 100 miles an hour in a corner. It's a different deal. But I think it was quite clear, and Jenson would have known, that Montoya was much quicker under braking into there. Montoya had sized him up a couple of times and then left his braking. I think he surprised Jenson, frankly, when he went down there, and Jenson ending up getting forced wide.
But he had a good look at him into there, didn't he, a couple of laps ago? Yeah. So, but I think Button also was worried probably about that Jordan in front, probably having a bit of a look at that as well. But you can see how close they came to going wheel to wheel. Button just running a little bit wide on the grass, and through goes Montoya. Here's Alonso, still in 3rd place, having a very lonely afternoon. And it's interesting getting your experience. 158 Grand Prix you started, Martin, and I noticed in the records that today David Coulthard starts his 158 Grand Prix, exactly the same number as you managed.
Yep, he's won 13 of his, but he's not going to win today's one, sadly. He's down in 8th place. He's now been lapped. McLaren's been lapped by the Ferraris, just as I think everybody apart from Alonso's, even the Williams could be lapped today. That'll be something to see a bit later on. That's not what we all prophesied before we came down here, is it? All us experts on Formula One, we all thought the Williams were looking mighty and they could be lapped.
Reminds me a bit of 1998. Do you remember Häkkinen and Coulthard, the very dominant McLaren at the beginning of that season? But that championship went down to the wire, didn't it, in Suzuka at the end of the season? So should never draw too many conclusions from what you get at the first Grand Prix of the year. This is an odd track, Albert Park. It does tend to favour one car. It tends to flatter it. The Williams was flattered through the mid-90s. The McLaren was flattered in the late 90s. And Ferrari have been flattered in the last couple of years as well. So let's see what happens the rest of the season.
I agree with you. It is a unique racetrack in many respects, as Alonso pits from 3rd place for his final scheduled stop of the afternoon. The end of lap 40, the leaders are into lap 41.
And the interesting thing here is he should be able to rejoin comfortably in front of Ralf Schumacher. If Schumacher is on a 2-stop strategy, he will make no more stops this afternoon. He had a 32-second advantage. That's usually more than enough to be able to get out. We should see Ralf Schumacher at the top of the pit straight at best, and unless something untoward has happened.
Ted Kravitz is in the pits.
Just a word on BAR. Their tyres are starting to fade really badly. This was what they were afraid of. They've done all their tyre testing in cold conditions in Europe, and now when they've got here, all right, it's not hot, but it's much warmer, and they've started to go off. They can't wait until Jensen's next pit stop.
Yeah, that's a shame for them then, a lot of work to do. That's not an easy problem to fix. If your car's hard on its tyres, that's a fundamental design with the wheelbase or with the geometry of the rear suspension or weight distribution. All of those issues are very difficult to change in an 18-race season with 8 intercontinental races. This is the hardest Grand Prix yet any of us will ever have been through. There's no doubt about that. So if they've got a tyre degradation problem, that'll take quite a bit of fixing. Fisichella's beginning to fly again. Now he's got rid of Heidfeld. He's in the 26s and putting on the sort of pace we were expecting. And that's Massa. He just looks like he's on the edge of that all the time, and every so often it happens, sadly.
Yeah, well, his last lap was 3 seconds slower than the man he's chasing, Takuma Sato. I reckon that moment there probably had something to do with it. Massa now beginning to fall back into the clutches of his teammate Fisichella. His advantage just 10 seconds. So a very good, strong early part to the race for Massa, but now he's beginning to fade, and Fisichella is showing what he's going to do. He really wants to get on top of him. And look at this, Michael Schumacher putting a lap on Jarno Trulli in the Renault. And as you say, that's not what a lot of people were predicting going into this season, that a Renault would be lapped by a Ferrari at the first race.
Yep. Next man to be lapped then is Jenson Button, who's only 4 seconds down the road from Michael Schumacher. Schumacher yet to pit again before the end of the Grand Prix, but so is everybody else apart from Alonso. We're not those that are on 3 stoppers anyway, but Michael Schumacher then starts yet another lap.
And Mark Webber has retired from the Grand Prix. Louise Goodman's with him.
Mark, no fairy tale ending today.
No, unfortunately not. It was a shame. Wish we were still out there. I was enjoying it. I think that was where the pace of the car was, just trying to hang on to the back of the big guys there, and was really, really enjoying it. And we lost 6th and 7th, so 5 gears these days is not enough, unfortunately.
But nonetheless, you must be encouraged by the pace and the performance the team's shown this weekend.
Yeah, that's nice. But we should have got to the checkered flag. But you've got to take it the rough with this move in this game, and it's a shame. But that's how it is.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, no problems.
Paul Stoddart, I heard him on the radio this morning saying Mark Webber will be the world champion in 2006 or 7. Fellow Aussie, of course, but Stoddart a big fan of Webber's, as is most of the Formula One paddock. Nice guy, says all the right things, and pretty handy behind the wheel. So a big star of the future, I think, there, but not this afternoon.
Yes, he took part in an amazing challenge over the winter. I think he did 1,000 kilometres around Tasmania. I saw a little bit on the plane on the way over here. They made a TV programme of it. Absolutely extraordinary. Kayaking, climbing mountains, hiking. He is the fittest guy. I mean, he's just unbelievable what he gets up to. All for charity. He does an awful lot of work for charity, Mark Webber, and the nicer guy you couldn't hope to meet. But look at the pace of Juan Montoya now. He's just set his fastest lap of the Grand Prix so far. He wants 4th place from his teammate Ralf Schumacher as we see the BAR of Jenson Button pitting.
So Button pits from 6th place then. Montoya suddenly found a whole bundle of pace, and that is Button going a lap down to Barrichello too, although of course the Ferraris have to stop one more time. He'll get that back, but eventually he still too will be one of the lapped drivers. Klein then is just behind him. He's in 14th place at the moment and travelling quite slowly. First Grand Prix distance for Klein then under pressure, and at the moment his pace is poor.
Well, another man who had a bit of a slow lap there is Fernando Alonso in 3rd place, a 1:27.5 for him. Probably traffic, I would imagine, the reason. There's quite a lot of lap traffic for the front runners to get through at the moment. But just to compare it, Rubens Barrichello doing 1:26s and Michael Schumacher 1:24s. So Alonso turned in quite a slow lap there. But nevertheless, still in 3rd place. And Ralf Schumacher has closed up a lot on him thanks to the extra stop that Alonso has made relative to Ralf Schumacher. It'll be very interesting to see whether Williams have to stop again with 15 laps to go in this 58-lap Grand Prix. I imagine that they do. But Ralf now coming into the sights of Juan Pablo Montoya, who is suddenly upping his pace. As I said, just turned his fastest lap of the Grand Prix so far, and he's a guy who reminds me of Mansell, Martin. He's one of those guys who are always in the race. You always have to have the camera on him because you never know what he's going to do next to you. Here comes Barrichello into the pits.
Barrichello has fallen to 16 seconds adrift. Michael's broken his spirit, and he can't even see him now down the long pit straight. So Barrichello not under pressure, of course. He was 51 seconds ahead of Alonso, although Alonso had already made his 3rd stop. Coulthard goes through and unlaps himself against Barrichello. That is Sato beginning to catch Coulthard at a significant rate. Sato in the BAR Honda catching Coulthard at least a second a lap.
Williams mechanics ready in the pit lane then. Both of their drivers, Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya, have done 2 stops in this Grand Prix. Clearly they're going to stop, at least one of them is going to stop 3 times. Their Ferrari guys getting ready for Michael Schumacher as well. So Schumacher leading Barrichello, Alonso 3rd, Ralf Schumacher 4th, Montoya 5th, Button 6th. Having dropped down from 3rd place at one point. Into the pits comes Michael Schumacher. It's Montoya that the Williams team are waiting for. He's right behind. There he is. Ted.
Montoya pits, but it's 1 lap too late. Those tyres will not be up to hot top temperature. And now there's a problem on the rear right. I don't believe it. Another one. That's more or less every pit stop Montoya's had today. There's been a problem with it. Meantime, Michael Schumacher in. No problems as usual. He's away.
And of course, the Ferrari is the best part of a lap ahead of Montoya. He follows him out of the pit. And if he catches him, he'll lap him. So another dismal stop then for Montoya. I don't know if it's the wheel nut sticking or the wheel on the spindle, but whatever it is, they're not able to cleanly change the wheels on that Williams of Montoya.
Montoya was, though, able to rejoin ahead of Jenson Button quite comfortably, so that's one piece of good news for him. That is the top 8, and we have 13 laps to go here in the Australian Grand Prix. lap 47 of the Australian Grand Prix. You're looking at Juan Montoya, who had a slow pit stop, but his teammate Ralf Schumacher has just made a stop of his own, and now Montoya is hunting him down. That's the battle developing for 4th place in this race. Michael Schumacher leading Rubens Barrichello, Alonso 3rd, and then the Williams battle. Jenson Button still in 6th, Trulli 7th, David Coulthard holding on to the final points position in 8th place. We've lost Nick Heidfeld in the Jordan, who stopped just a moment ago, and there seems to have been some sort of problem in a pit stop for Heidfeld and knocked over one of his mechanics. Hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about what happened there. Hopefully the mechanic is okay, but Heidfeld, having managed to get out of the pits, then pulled over at the side of the road.
Yes, he bumped into them rather than ran them over, so I don't think there's any need for panic on that one. But he almost looked like he missed his pit. He was going past his pit and turned in at the last moment and just didn't have enough steering lock. A very clumsy stop for Heidfeld, and then retired, as you say, just as he left the pit lane. And at the same time, we had Massa retiring too from 10th place. So 6 drivers out of the Grand Prix now. Massa, Heidfeld, Bruni, Webber, Baumgartner and Raikkonen. Raikkonen, the man that many people tipped to be this year's world champion, goes away from here with no points and a slow car.
Yes, and with the way that the championship point situation is now, with 10 points for a win, 8 for 2nd, 6 for 3rd, it really has a huge premium on getting points at every Grand Prix. You saw last year how long it took Michael Schumacher, who had a couple of poor results early in the year, to catch up championship leader Kimi Raikkonen, who was just banging in solid podium finishes. And it really does reward reliability. Also, with the one engine formula we have now, you've got to make an engine last an entire Grand Prix distance. Sorry, an entire weekend distance, over 500 miles. It's certainly both of those things rewarding reliability. You can't afford to have too many days when you don't score any points. And Kimi Raikkonen already, in race 1 of 18, has had a day of no points.
Rubens Barrichello is nursing something in his car. He's slowed down a lot now. He's a half a minute clear of Alonso, but clearly coasting along, probably 3 seconds slower than he was, 3.5 seconds slower actually than his fastest lap of the race. So both Ferrari drivers going much slower, but particularly Barrichello, who's now 22 seconds adrift and lapping a full second slower than that man Michael Schumacher.
It's interesting, isn't it? Schumacher 53 seconds ahead of the next non-Ferrari runner, Fernando Alonso. That really does send a chilling message out to the rest of Formula One, particularly to the Williams team here, Juan Montoya. He can point to his day and say, well, look, I dropped 4 places at the start. I had a poor start. I then had to fight. I got held up by Trulli. I've had very slow pit stops. I've had wheels getting stuck. You haven't seen the true pace from me today. But nevertheless, he is 80 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. And that tells its own story of a frustrating and rather ragged afternoon for Juan Pablo Montoya. Teammate Ralf Schumacher, well, he's just ahead, 4 seconds ahead of Montoya. And he's not had a particularly eventful afternoon, but he just hasn't been all that fast.
No, but I think they're going to be saved the ignominy of being lapped, because Michael's now coasting, doing roughly the what am I saying? It's true, doing roughly the same lap times as the rest of them. But they're swanning around out there now, and therefore I don't think he'll... There's that right rear wheel, look, that was slow going on. It's a wheel nut problem, it would seem, rather than anything else. And he was very eager to get away.
What's your read on the situation there with Montoya? I mean, he's a fairly fiery personality. He has a laid-back demeanour out of the cockpit, but it's pretty clear he's fairly tightly wound inside. He's leaving the team at the end of the year. A lot of people reckon that the human politics there, just the whole attitude, is going to be virtually unsustainable for the season. How can they all push as hard as the team push as hard for him, knowing that he's off? Well, how do you see that panning out?
Well, they'll just have to manage it, because it is going to be an issue, and it's no good saying it's not. He runs on a pretty short fuse, as we saw in a press conference this week. He's a fiery character, which is why he has so many fans around the world. And it's the team are going to have to manage the politics, the tensions, the emotions as the season unfolds. I think it depends on how many points he's got compared to Ralf as to just how big the management issue is.
Well, there we are, riding on board with him now, just getting a little bit wide on the outside of the turn.
It's very dry here, and very dry and dusty, and luckily the grass has got pretty much the same grip as the tarmac. But, he's got a We'll take a look at his tyres. Yeah, the left front look is looking pretty unhappy. That generates a lot of understeer in right-hand corners. It's a clockwise circuit, therefore, of course, more right-handers than left-handers to get back to the beginning. And he will be nursing that. That'll be slowing him down. And there is your race leader, just coasting along the pit straight with Montoya in sight.
Well, the Sauber team have Giancarlo Fisichella in 10th place at the moment. As Martin mentioned a moment ago, they've lost Felipe Massa, and Ted is down in their garage.
Yes, they're searching for clues on the telemetry. It's inconclusive at the moment, but their two possibilities are a complete electric failure because the radio also died. Felipe couldn't say what was wrong, or they think it may be a recurrence of the fuel pressure problem that they had on Friday. Whatever, not a good weekend so far.
No, it's a shame. And we thought they'd be strong, didn't we? The sort of the Ferrari B team as such, with the same tyres, and we really expected more here from the Sauber team. Michael, 26 is still, he is actually still reeling in the Williams at that, ahead of him, but Rubens Barrichello still very slow. He's now just 23 seconds ahead of Alonso.
Just 7 laps to go in this Australian Grand Prix, the first round of the 2004 Formula One World Championship. 18 rounds in total, and it looks like round 1 to Ferrari. Michael Schumacher leading this Grand Prix from teammate Rubens Barrichello, chasing his 4th win in 5 years, Michael Schumacher, around this track. He just got a sight of Takuma Sato there, his rear wing slightly damaged. He is running in 9th place at the moment. The order remains unchanged, and he is Alonso in 3rd place. We have Ralf Schumacher leading the Williams teammate Montoya in 5th. Button 6th, Trulli 7th, and the last of the points, David Coulthard. We've hardly seen Coulthard all day. He's had a very quiet and uneventful afternoon. His teammate Kimi Raikkonen was the first man to retire from this Grand Prix. From the start, the 2 Ferraris comfortably into the lead. Terrific start by Fernando Alonso, moving him up from 5th on the grid to 3rd, which is where he is now. He's had a very strong afternoon. Ralf Schumacher started this Grand Prix in 8th place. He's battled through up into 4th place. I guess the man who's had the most eventful day, though, is Juan Pablo Montoya, starting 3rd on the grid, but a very poor getaway and was swallowed up by the Renaults and by his teammate. And he has had a terrible time, really. Some slow pit stops. He was held up by the Renault of Jarno Trulli for at least 10 laps in the middle phase of the Grand Prix. And he is a very frustrated 5th at the moment. One of the men who really wants to throw down the gauntlet and challenge Michael Schumacher for this World Championship this year. So, if you like, Schumacher's 2 main rivals, Montoya and Raikkonen, both having pretty difficult afternoons here.
And look at the front tyres on the Toyota too. The Michelins are not happy on this racetrack in these conditions. Ralf Schumacher's front tyres not looking good either. Louise.
Yeah, just that we saw that Nick Heidfelder had a problem with that last stop, and a couple of the mechanics got hit. What happened was with the...
Sorry about that. We've lost Louise on the live link down to the pits. We'll have to go back to her shortly. I don't know what the message was going to be.
it was about the Jordan mechanic.
Yeah, it was about. I don't know what the actual message was. I know it's about. But anyway, hopefully we'll get back to her and find out. So Michael Schumacher now leading by 24 seconds from Barrichello, who's 28 ahead of Alonso, who's 22 ahead of Schumacher. Hardly close up front, is it? Montoya 10 seconds behind in 5th place. Button 8.4 behind him. Trulli 12.2 behind Button. Coulthard just edging towards Jarno Trulli. Trulli 7th, David Coulthard 8th. Sato a long way behind Coulthard now after his 3rd stop. Coulthard on a 2-stopper then, as were both Jaguars. Everybody else 3-stopping.
Yep, the closest battle on the track at the moment, that between Giorgio Pantano, the debutant in the Jordan team, sole representative of Jordan, still on the track in 13th place, and Olivier Panis, who set no time yesterday in qualifying in the Toyota, started towards the very back of the grid and hasn't really made very much progress from there. He is now in 14th place, and he has in fact just passed Pantano, so that battle has been resolved. We're riding on board with Alonso with just 5 laps to go in this Grand Prix, and Martin was talking about the performance of the Michelin tyres here. They were getting an awful lot of plaudits in the second half of 2003, but you have to take your hat off to Bridgestone, who've obviously gone away, learned a lot of lessons from what happened last year with Ferrari, and have worked very, very hard over the winter to come up with a tyre to work. And just look how well preserved they are on that Ferrari. It really has been a terrific performance by Bridgestone here.
Yeah, it's the only man that's really kept them in is Alonso, who's running in 3rd place. His car does look, as we suspected, a little bit kinder to its tyres. What happens is you start to slide and the surface of the tyre grains up into little rubber balls, and the more it grains, the more you slide, the more it grains. And it's a hopeless situation that you really struggle to recover. But remember, Michelin's used to go through that phase, didn't they? 6 or 8 laps in and then really come back strongly to the driver. But maybe it's just not warm enough today for that. Nice. That's a Ferrari letting through the BAR. So Michael Schumacher then has just done a 1:29. Is he creeping into some problems, or is he just coasting towards the end of the Grand Prix? Is this early signs of... Let's have a look at his sector times. He's 4 seconds slow on this current lap. He's not coming in the pit lane. We haven't really heard his engine note at the moment, but Michael Schumacher would not be going that slow intentionally, unless they're shaping up a nice formation finish or something for tomorrow's newspapers. Let's wait and see, but he's absolutely coasting.
Just going past us under our commentary position, Jenson Button, who he'd allowed through, was going through, and the revs were noticeably much, much higher on that Honda engine than the Ferrari engine following through. Here we are, let's have a listen.
Can't hear anything wrong as such, it's just going very slowly. There's the gap down to 18 seconds. He was 1.4 slower in the first sector alone. Ted, have you got any news?
Well, there's certainly no worried faces at Ferrari. Everything's calm. The mechanics are all sitting down. They're not preparing. Normally, if something is going to happen, they'll at least put one guy into the pit box in case he has to come in. But something Ross Brawn was saying to me when I spoke to him this morning, Martin, he was saying that at the end of the race, we will turn everything down. If we're in a good position, we'll turn everything down. Let's just hope for Ferrari fans that's the case.
They could afford to turn it around, turn it upside down, and then turn it down, and they'll still win the race. But we're 3 laps, 2.5 laps to go still. And I just don't know why, if they're trying to do a formation finish, you do that in the last lap. I don't know why he's cruising this slowly. Once again, he's going to be 4 to 5 seconds off Barrichello's pace. So Barrichello will be down to 14 seconds, but again, there's no sign of any particular problem. He's shifting up okay, the engine sounds like it's firing on all 10 cylinders, and no smoke coming out of it, nothing hanging off. So we have to assume that there's a bit of showboating going on at this stage.
Yeah, well, he can certainly afford to do it. As things stood, he was 50 seconds clear of the next non-Ferrari runner, Fernando Alonso. So I guess the one thing about this is the headlines coming away from this Grand Prix is that Ferrari wins and wins big, but perhaps not with as big a margin as it might have been if Schumacher hadn't babied the car in the last 3 laps. Very uncharacteristic of him. Always a danger you might lose your concentration, I would imagine, when you're back off to that extent after a hard hour and a half Lopes work at the cockpit. Here's David Coulthard, though, battling on in 8th place.
It's a long Grand Prix when your car's not working right or whatever. Whether he's nursing something, we don't know, but he's back in the 128s as well. But hanging on to 8th place, the final World Championship point. McLaren look like they're going to go away from here with 1 point only. So Schumacher, Michael from Barrichello, Alonso, Ralf Schumacher, Montoya 5th, Button 6th, Trulli 7th, Coulthard 8th. They're the point scorers, and they're all spaced out enough that there's no real challenge going to come in these last 2 laps. Michael Schumacher then just finishing that penultimate lap as he goes into the pit straight to start the final one, and yes, I think he's just coasting.
So what conclusions are you drawing from the opening Grand Prix of 2004?
I just hope that it's a bad day for Michelin, and that they can peg this Ferrari back, because it was a red wash, wasn't it? Absolute red wash. Only Alonso with a prayer of keeping them in sight, and the rest of them seem to have been, they've not even been fighting each other, they've just been fighting themselves, struggling for consistent times, struggling for fast lap times, and absolutely nowhere.
Nowhere indeed. Alonso 39 seconds then behind Michael Schumacher in the closing stage of this Grand Prix, but it could have been closer to a minute if Schumacher had pressed on at the pace that he was going for the first 50 or so laps of the Grand Prix. Montoya was unable in the end to close up on Ralf Schumacher, unless Schumacher has some sort of problem on the final lap. Montoya unable to close the gap on him. There, the Renault mechanics. They've got a lot to celebrate today, because Fernando Alonso has been really one of the stars of the day, no doubt about that, in 3rd place.
Yeah, if we're going to turn a Grand Prix into an endurance event with one engine for the weekend, and we're going to see people limping to the line like the end of the Le Mans 24 hours, it's no good. Formula One is a sprint from the start to the finish. I don't like to see people having to pussyfoot around and just mollycoddle their engines. It's not what it's about.
Well, I'm sure that many would agree with that, as Michael Schumacher comes down the pit straight. There's the checkered flag, and Michael Schumacher takes win number 71 in what has been an extraordinary career already. This his 13th season in Formula One, and it's his 4th win here in Australia. What a record he has. 4 wins in 5 years. Rubens Barrichello, solid drive by him today. He backed right off in the final part of the Grand Prix, having pressed Michael Schumacher pretty hard in the early stages, and we're waiting now to see Fernando Alonso. We have half a minute to wait for Fernando Alonso. I think that's probably him now. Here he is, yes, coming down the pit straight. All the Renault mechanics at the top of the fence cheering. A great start to the season for Renault then, a podium finish for Fernando Alonso to go with the 3 that he had last season in his first year with the Renault team. So cracking start for Alonso, but really it's all Ferrari day. Still waiting for Ralf Schumacher and Juan Montoya to come over. Williams having plenty to think about here this afternoon, I think. But these guys, huge amount of Italians living here in Melbourne. Italians and Greeks, the largest expatriate community here in Melbourne. And they'll certainly be going nuts tonight in the Italian quarter.
He seems to get as much pleasure out of every pole and every win still, doesn't he? More and more. That's the one thing. One thing I learned from Michael Schumacher when I was his teammate. In the beginning, when he was up on the podium, he was giving it so large. I thought, hang on, Michael, you know, you finished 3rd, so what, kind of thing. But he's right, because there's enough bad days. There's usually more bad days than good days for anybody's sports career. You've got to absolutely take all the energy out of those good days, and Michael has been very, very good at that.
So Schumacher, Barrichello 1 and 2, Alonso 3, Ralf Schumacher finished 4th, Juan Montoya was 5th, Jenson Button, he promised a little bit more than 6th place today, but in the end, given the way his car was wearing its tyres, I think he drove doggedly. He tried to resist Juan Montoya as long as he could, but in the end Montoya was simply too strong and pressed through. Jarno Trulli, he had a so-so day really in the Renault, finishing a long way down on his teammate Fernando Alonso, and the final points to David Coulthard. Takuma Sato, another finish for BAR, that's good for Honda's reliability in 9th place. Fisichella 10th in the Sauber. Klein in the Jaguar. We didn't see very much of him today, but he brought that car home. His teammate Webber unable to finish here, so a debut finish for Clean. D'Amata 12th, poor day for Toyota, ahead of Panis in 13th. And Pantano on his debut for the Jordan team, finishing 3 laps down on Michael Schumacher in 14th and last place. 6 retirements: Massa, Heidfeld, Bruni, Webber, Baumgartner and Kimi Räikkönen. And I have to ask you now, Martin, your driver of the day.
I'll go with Alonso, I think, for really making the best of a bad job. I think Michael and Rubens did a stellar job up front, particularly in qualifying. It was a no-contest Grand Prix in terms of other people really fighting with Ferrari. I think Alonso was boxing above his weight in terms of what he achieved with the package he's got. He ended up some 40 seconds, 50-odd seconds ahead of his teammate and looked the better driver all day. And so I'll go with Alonso as driver of the day.
I would not disagree with that. Fernando Alonso, Martin's driver of the day. A terrific performance from him. Let's hope we see the kind of showing in Malaysia in 2 weeks' time that he put on last year when he got his first pole position in Formula One around that Malaysia track in Sepang. 2 weeks, we will find out. Certainly expecting some pretty hot weather there. And then on to Bahrain for the first Grand Prix in the Middle East 2 weeks after that, and I don't think it's going to be too chilly there either. So it's important for Ferrari to get the big points today, wasn't it? Where they're Bridgestone tyres in the colder climates.
Yeah, Bahrain's looking a great racetrack. Looking forward to that one, no doubt about it. Parc Fermé then, with 3 podium guys in a different park in a different place so that they can get up. And it's quite slick the way Formula One runs this presentation now. And there's a lot of urgency to get the drivers out there, get the sponsors on display. And there's Michael. He's always the same, isn't he? He's just so into, his energy doesn't ever seem to evaporate. His desire and passion and excitement. And he's the second oldest driver in Formula One.
And those 2 drivers, Ferrari drivers, both the most experienced in Formula One. No one comes close to them in the number of Grand Prix they've started. Michael closing up on 200 Grand Prix starts, and as you say, still as fresh, as young, and as motivated as he ever was. And it's quite appropriate that one of the youngest drivers alongside them there on the podium, Fernando Alonso, hopefully a big career in front of him. And going into this weekend, Martin, Luca Di Montezemolo, the president of Ferrari, was paying a lot of compliments to Alonso, and a lot of people feel that he might be the man to go there if and when Michael Schumacher retires. But all of that some way in the future, I fancy.
Yeah, they've got to wrestle him away from Renault first, and obviously he's managed by Flavio Briatore, so that's quite an interesting scenario too. But I can well see Alonso morphed in a set of these red overalls at some point in the not too distant future. Actually, Herbie Blasch there, long-time supporter in massive involvement in Formula One. Used to be with the Brabham team when Bernie Ecclestone was running it, and Herbie works with Charlie Whiting up in race control, and one of Bernie's men, really, Herbie.
Yep, just Michael Schumacher getting on the scales there. That's interesting. They're separating the drivers from the cars. They used to weigh the driver on the same bridge that they weigh the cars. They're not doing that anymore. Rubens Barrichello, you lost any weight today, Rubens? Alonso on the Renault diet, gets on the scales as well. I like this man's style. He's wandering around in a bandana most of the weekend in his head, and he's just got this sort of Catalan Spanish flair. There's something about him that just really works for me. He's like a pop star, isn't he?
Yeah, he's got a good attitude to it all. But, I think they're really the only smiling faces here today are going to be people in red shirts and red overalls, because everybody else is going to feel pretty smashed by this performance and their lack of performance. So, a lot of work to be done in the next 10 days. Some teams they'll be having their test teams out in Europe. McLaren have got a lot of runners in, no doubt Williams will be out. I'm sure Renault will be getting all their test drivers out onto the racetrack and doing a lot of work before Malaysia to try to make the improvements that are so obviously required.
Jean Todt there, sporting director, team principal of the Ferrari team. Look how fresh Schumacher looks. He looked like that before he got in the car, and he's just done an hour and a half behind the wheel.
Just a sea of red outside our commentary box window here with the fans. That's the team, of course, applauding the 71st victory. And but the fans have all got their caps and flags too as they've migrated down onto the pit straight.
Face of joy on the top of the podium, the German flag, the Brazilian flag on the left, and the Spanish flag for Alonso on the right. Win number 71 for Michael Schumacher, and that beautiful trophy based on the steering wheel of three-time Australian world champion Jack Brabham. One of the nicest trophies, I think, in Formula One. Ron Walker will present to Barrichello, but another win, another trophy for Jean Todt in this extraordinary era, the greatest era really in Ferrari's history that he's presided over.
And he used to stand on that wheel or turn it with his hands. It's enormous. Is it the same size? Do you think it's the same size?
I don't think so. That would be a truck, wouldn't it?
I think so.
Colin Osborne, president of CAMS, to Fernando Alonso.
Great day for Alonso. Yeah, for you, and for all of you. Cool kid. He'll be up there plenty of times the rest of this season, won't he? Well, we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time in Sepang, Malaysia. We'll see how Williams, Renault and McLaren can react to what we've seen here this afternoon. But the message very clearly from Michael Schumacher is, catch me if you can.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Martin. A Sunday afternoon stroll around the park for Michael Schumacher. He's done it before, winner 2000, winner 2001, winner 2002, and the Wizard of Oz in 2004.